the fiscal year 2017 budget request. I welcome our witnesses, Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, Frank Kendall, Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, Dr. Michael Gilmore, Program Executive Officer for the F-35, Lieutenant General Christopher Bogdan, and Director of Acquisition and Sourcing Management for the Government Accountability Office, Michael Sullivan. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program is the largest and most expensive acquisition program in the Department of Defense's history. The full capabilities this aircraft will eventually provide are critical to America's national security, our ability to deter our potential adversaries around the globe, and if necessary, respond with overwhelming force to any future conflicts that may require military intervention. At the same time, the F-35's program's record of performance has been both a scandal and a tragedy with respect to cost, schedule, and performance. And it's a textbook example of why this committee has placed such a high priority on reforming the broken defense acquisition system. The F-35 schedule for development has now stretched to more than 15 years. Costs have more than doubled from original estimates. Aircraft deliveries amount to no more than a mere trickle relative to the original promises of the program. The original F-35 delivery schedule promised 1,013 F-35s of all variants would be delivered by the end of fiscal year 2016. In reality, we will have 179. Because the Air Force, Marines, and Navy were all counting on the F-35s that never appeared, combat aircraft and strike fighter capacity shortfalls in all three services have reached critical levels, severely impacting readiness and ultimately limiting the Department's ability to meet the requirements of the defense strategy. In the Department's fiscal year 2017 budget request, dozens more aircraft are being deferred from the future year's defense plan, resulting in a situation where the last F-35 will be delivered in 2040. I cannot fathom how this strategy makes any sense. Purchasing combat aircraft with a 40-year-old design in light of all the testimony this committee has received about how our potential adversaries are rapidly catching up with and in some cases matching America's military technological advantages. Those F-35 aircraft being delivered are not being delivered as promised. They have problems with maintenance, diagnostic software, radar instabilities, sensor fusion shortfalls, fuel system problems, structural cracks from service life testing, engine reliability deficits, limitations on the crew escape system that cause pilot weight restrictions, and potential cyber vulnerabilities. This list is as troubling as it is long. At long last, we are approaching the end of the long nightmare known as, quote, concurrency, the ill-advised simultaneously development, testing, and production of a complex and technologically challenging weapon system that the Department estimates will end up costing the American taxpayers $1.8 billion. But many questions remain, such as the total number of these aircraft the nation should buy or can even afford, the costs of future upgrades to keep these aircraft relevant in the face of an ever-evolving threat, and the management and administration of a so-called joint program that General Bogdan himself has admitted consists of aircraft that have only 20 to 25% commonality across the three variants, as compared to the original goal of 70 to 90%. The F-35A, F-35B, and F-35C are essentially three distinct aircraft with significantly different missions and capability requirements. The illusion of jointness perpetuated by the structure of the F-35 joint program stifles the proper alignment of responsibility and accountability this program so desperately needs. There are also questions as to when the System Development and Demonstration Phase, or SDD, will actually be completed so that initial operational test and evaluation can begin. Originally scheduled to conclude in 2017, we have every indication that schedule pressures will likely extend SDD well into fiscal year 2018. I'm very concerned the Department may attempt to take shortcuts by deferring mission capability content into later block upgrades, and by doing so, shortchange the warfighter once again by delaying necessary capabilities. The F-35 was designed to replace multiple aircraft of all three services, the A-10, F-16, F-18, and the Harrier. That's why the operational testing and evaluation must be of such high fidelity. There can be no question in the minds of the American people that their gigantic investment in this program will pay off with greatly improved capabilities that far surpass the mission capabilities of all these individual combat aircraft. The Congress will not likely allow any more of these legacy aircraft to be retired from service until there is no doubt the F-35 can adequately replace them. Nor is the Congress likely to entertain a, quote, block buy or other multi-year procurement schemes until the initial operational test and evaluation is completed and a positive milestone decision is made to commence full-rate production, both of which I understand are scheduled to occur in fiscal year 2019. The Department appears to be considering managing the F-35 follow-on modernization, which is estimated to cost over $8 billion for the first block upgrade within the overall F-35 program. This is incredible given the Department's dismal track record on these upgrade programs, as the F-22A modernization and upgrade debacle showed. I have seen no evidence that DoD's processes have improved to a level that would remove the need for a separate major defense acquisition program that would enable close scrutiny by Congress. Moreover, I expect the Department to use fixed-price contracts for the F-35 modernization effort in order to protect taxpayers. Despite this program's many stumbles, there are some positive signs for the F-35. The Marines declared initial operational capability, or IOC, last July in Yuma, Arizona, and are preparing for their first F-35B overseas deployment next year. Air Force personnel at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, who fly and maintain the aircraft, are preparing for Air Force IOC this fall. They report that the latest lots of F-35As are flying very well, with a significant jump in reliability and warfighting capability as compared to earlier aircraft. General Bogdan has steadily pushed down aircraft procurement unit costs. Reliability metrics are on the rise, and each lot of aircraft deliveries possess increasingly effective warfighting capabilities. All of this is a testament to hard work of military and civilian personnel inside this program today. They're doing their best to overcome misguided decisions taken long ago, and they're having success in important areas. However, there is a lot of development left to complete in this program, and with it comes the potential for more problems, schedule delays, and increased costs. This committee will remain steadfast in its oversight responsibilities to ensure our warfighters get the capabilities they need on time and at reasonable cost. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much,
Could I
Mr. Chairman.
hold just 1 second? Since a quorum is now present, I ask the committee to consider a list of 920 pending military nominations. Including in this list are the nominations of General Vincent K. Brooks, USA, to be Commander, United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, U.S. Forces, Korea; General Curtis M. Scaparrotti, USA, to be Commander, U.S. European Command and Supreme Allied Commander, Europe; and General Laurie J. Robinson, USAF, to be Commander, U.S. Northern Command, Commander, North American Aerospace Defense Command. All these nominations have been before the committee the required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report these 920?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me join you in welcoming the witnesses today. We're grateful for your service. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Today, we will seek a better understanding of the progress the Department is making in fielding the Joint Strike Fighter, what actions the Department has taken to ameliorate problems with the program, what is the best judgment available of how effective these actions will be in preventing problems with the program, including additional cost overruns and delays. Overall, the production program has been delivering on expected cost reductions on aircraft lots. However, we still have to complete the System Development and Demonstration SDD program that is expected to deliver complete warfighting capability to each of the three variants of the F-35. And we may not have seen all the potential schedule changes in SDD, since not all the program's difficulties are behind us. Quoting from Dr. Gilmore's prepared testimony, Although the Marine Corps has declared initial operational capability, IOC, and the Air Force plans to do so later this calendar year, the F-35 system remains immature and provides limited combat capability, with the officially planned start of initial operational test and evaluation, IOT&E, just over 1 year away. Dr. Gilmore also assesses that the F-35 program will not be ready for IOT&E until calendar year 18 at the soonest, and these assessments are of concern. Several years ago, we required the Department to estimate the dates for initial operating capability IOC of the 3 variants of the F-35. The Marine Corps declared IOC last year in July. The Air Force is scheduled to declare IOC later this year, and the Navy is scheduled to declare IOC in 2018. The Marine Corps IOC was based on a version of the program software called Block 2B. The Air Force's declaration of IOC will be based on the Block 3I software. The Navy's declaration of IOC will be based on the Block 3F software version. Until recently, in order to support the IOC dates, the Program Office has been working on versions of both Blocks 3I and 3F of the software simultaneously. The Block 3F software depends on having a stable baseline for the Block 3I software. With the contractor team working on multiple releases of software, correcting deficiencies and achieving software stability has proved elusive. Working on the 2 software packages simultaneously was intended to save time, but that time was lost when the project had to be redone because of mistakes stemming from the concurrency. Within the past year, the Program Executive Officer halted work on the Block 3F software until the problems with the Block 3I software could be sorted out. We need to understand what effect this altered approach may have on the overall program schedule. Beyond that, we are planning for sizable upgrades in F-35 capability through spiral development efforts for the Block 4 program. The Block 4 program will likely be a multi-billion-dollar effort. We want to make sure that we do not repeat past mistakes. Beyond the SDD program, there is an even larger issue of the cost to sustain the F-35 once we have bought it. These estimates are at one point as large as $1 trillion. We need to understand what the Department is doing to reduce these potential costs. If we do nothing, we run the risk of allowing increased costs to sustain and support the F-35 to reduce the funds available for investment in the future force. This committee has been a strong supporter of the JSF program from the beginning. However, we must continue our vigilance on costs so that there's a proper balance between F-35 and other important DoD acquisitions. Thank you very much for calling the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I welcome the witnesses. Secretary Kendall.
Thank you, Chairman McCain. Chairman McCain, Minority Leader Reid, members of the committee, I'm happy to be here today with Lieutenant General Bogdan, the Program Executive Officer for the F-35 program, as well as with Dr. Gilmore and Mr. Sullivan, to discuss the status of the program and the President's budget request for FY 2017. My opening comments, I'd like to discuss my own involvement with the F-35. Lieutenant General Bogdan will provide more detail on the current state of the program. My first exposure to the F-35 was in the fall of 2009, as I was awaiting confirmation to be the Principal Deputy Undersecretary for AT&L. I was briefed by a member of Dr. Gilmore's staff, and my reaction at the time was one of surprise at the extremely long period of low-rate initial production, approximately 10 years, and the very high amount of concurrency in the program, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman. The concurrency being the overlap, in this case, between development and production. It was one of the highest and therefore most risky that I'd ever seen. Production was started in 2007, well before the stability of the design could be confirmed through testing. I later called the decision to start production so early acquisition malpractice, a phrase which seems to have stuck. In early 2010, also before I was confirmed, the program manager was replaced. The new program manager was Admiral Dave Van Lett, a very seasoned and competent professional. At that time, the F-35 went through a Nunn-McCurdy review as a result of the cost increases. And as a result of the review, the program was re-baselined under Admiral Van Lett to the baseline that it is operating against now and has ever since. In 2010, my predecessor, Dr. Carter, ended the use of cost-plus contracts for production, starting with Lot 4. In the fall of 2011, I became the acting undersecretary. One of my early decisions was to bring Lieutenant General Bogdan in to replace Vice Admiral Van Lett. Lieutenant General Bogdan has proven to be a highly competent and professional program executive officer. In the fall of 2011, based on early operational assessment report from Dr. Gilmore's office, I commissioned an independent review of the technical status of the program, focused on the design stability of the program. At that time, the extent of the open design issues and the risk of high concurrency costs for retrofitting aircraft that had already been produced with fixes that were found later led me to seriously consider halting production. Based on several considerations, I made the decision to hold production constant at 30 aircraft per year for the next 2 years and to assess progress before increasing production at that point. Under Lieutenant General Bogdan's leadership, the program has made steady progress for the past 4 years. Cost and development have remained within the baseline. Production costs have steadily decreased, beating the independent cost estimate each year. The cost of sustainment has also been reduced by approximately 10% since the program was rebaselined. There have been a few months of schedule slip, primarily due to software complexity. While I do continue to monitor progress monthly and conduct annual program deep dive reviews, the F-35 is no longer a program that keeps me up at night. There are some design issues that still need to be resolved. The test program is about 90% complete, and I do expect additional discovery, but I will be surprised if a major design problem surfaces at this point. Our task now is to complete the test program, achieve IOC for the Air Force later this year and the Navy in 2018, complete OT&E, and support our many partners and foreign sales customers as they become operational over the next few years. We also need to move forward with the follow-on development, and I appreciate this committee's support for authorizing and funding that important work. The F-35 is a game-changing state-of-the-art weapon system, but our potential adversaries are not standing still. Threat advances in areas like integrated air defense systems, air-to-air weapons, and electronic warfare must be continuously countered. We must continuously improve the weapon system to keep pace with emerging threats. And I thank the committee for its support and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General Bogdan.
Thank you, sir. Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity here today to discuss the F-35 Lightning II program. My purpose here today is to provide you an honest, balanced assessment of where the program stands today. That means I'll tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly about the program, and tell you what my team is doing to reduce costs, improve F-35 performance, and meet our schedule commitments. The F-35 Lightning II is of vital importance to the security of the United States, and as the Program Executive Officer and Program Director, I'm committed to delivering an affordable, reliable, and sustainable fifth-generation weapon system to our warfighters and those of our international partners and foreign military sales customers. Overall, the F-35 program is executing well across the entire spectrum of acquisition to include development and design, flight test, production fielding, base stand-up, maintenance and support, and building a global sustainment enterprise. The program is at a pivot point. It is now rapidly changing, growing, and accelerating. We'll be finishing our development program in late 2017 and begin a transition to a leaner, more efficient follow-on modernization program. We'll see production grow from delivering 45 aircraft in 2015 to delivering over 100 airplanes in 2018 and up to 145 by 2020. Additionally, in the next 4 years, we will continue the stand-up of 17 new operating F-35 bases all over the world. We are also accelerating the creation of our heavy maintenance and repair capability and supply chain in the Pacific, European, and North American regions, creating a truly global sustainment capability. However, the program is not without risks and challenges, as these come with any program of this size and complexity. But I'm confident the current risks and issues we face can be resolved, and we'll be able to overcome future problems and deliver the F-35's full combat capability. I've often said that the mark of a good program is not that it has no problems, but rather that it discovers problems, implements solutions, improves the weapon system, and at the same time keeps the program on track. I believe we've been doing that for a number of years now. Let me highlight a few of our recent accomplishments. Last year, we began U.S. Air Force and partner pilot training at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, where a blend of U.S. and partner F-35 instructor pilots are helping to train U.S. Air Force and other partner pilots. And the Air Force is now receiving F-35As at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and training is underway to ready its first combat-coded F-35 squadron to be operational later this year. Also, the United States Marine Corps is successfully flying and deploying to austere sites for training and dropping and shooting live weapons with the F-35B today. In addition, industry committed to and then successfully delivered 45 airplanes last year, including the first aircraft produced in the Italian assembled assembly facility in Cameri, Italy. From a production perspective, we've delivered a total of 176 of our test, operational, and training aircraft to date. On the cost front, the price of purchasing F-35s continues to decline lot after lot, a trend I will believe will continue for many years. I expect the cost of an F-35A with an engine and fee in then-year dollars to be less than $85 million in fiscal year 19. As I said before, the program is changing, growing, and accelerating, but it is not without its issues, risks, and challenges. Let me highlight some of these areas and what we're doing about them. On the technical front, we have a number of risks I'd like to mention. At the top of my list are both aircraft software and our maintenance system known as the Autonomic Logistics Information System, or ALIS. We've seen stability issues with our Block 3 software. However, we believe we have identified the root cause of these problems and have tested solutions in the lab and in flight test and are now completing our flight test with these solutions. Our initial indications of this flight testing are positive, and we've seen software stability improve to 2 to 3 times better than what we've seen in the past. By the end of this month, I am encouraged that we'll have enough data to consider this problem an issue closed. We've also experienced schedule issues with the development of our next version of ALIS, version 2.02. I'm prepared to discuss this issue as well as topics such as our egress system, U.S. Air Force IOC, initial operational test, and recent U.S. Air Force and U.S. Marine Corps deployments, and the status of our partners and FMS customers during the question and answers. In summary, the F-35 program is moving forward, sometimes slower than I'd like, but moving forward and making progress nonetheless. We're nearing the completion of development and flight test in 2017. We're ramping up production, standing up new bases, and growing the global sustainment enterprise. We've also stabilized and reduced the major costs on this program. As with any big, complex program, new discoveries, challenges, and obstacles will occur. The F-35 is still in development, and this is a time when challenges and discoveries are expected. However, we believe the combined government industry team has the ability to resolve our current issues and any future discoveries. I intend to continue leading this program with integrity, discipline, transparency, and accountability. It is my intention to complete this program within the resources and time I've been given, and I intend on holding my team and myself accountable for the outcomes on this program. We never forget that someday your sons and daughters, your grandsons or granddaughters, will take an F-35 into harm's way to defend our freedom. Delivering them the best possible weapon system is a responsibility I and my team take very seriously. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the program. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Reid, members of the committee, I'll focus my remarks on readiness for initial operational test and evaluation and achievement of full combat capability. My estimate is the program will not be ready to begin operational test and evaluation until mid-calendar year 2018 at the earliest. That's about a 1-year delay relative to the program's objective date and 6 months relative to the threshold date. There are a number of reasons that that's my assessment. The most complex mission system testing remains, as does verification of fixes to a number of significant problems. In-flight stability of mission systems with the new Technical Refresh 2 processor has been poor, but there is recent indication of significant progress in achieving stability, although those stability issues, while they were being fixed, led to delays in Block 3F development, which provides full combat capability. Nonetheless, there is good news on the stability front. Significant ground startup instabilities persist, however. Inadequate fusion of sensor information from sensors on a single aircraft, as well as among a 4-ship of aircraft, resulting in cluttered and confusing displays, are still a problem. 4 ships will be frequently used in combat to enable key multi-ship sensor applications that are necessary to deal with the increasingly complex and stressing integrated air defense systems potential adversaries began fielding in the middle of last decade. Shortfalls in electronic warfare and electronic attack, geolocation, electronic countermeasures persist. There are shortfalls in the performance of the distributed aperture system, including missile warning and situational awareness. Long aerial refueling times, up to 2 to 3 times those of legacy aircraft. Lack of viable moving target capability, which is crucial for successful conduct of close air support and other missions. Lack of display to pilots of failures in critical mission systems components, which is unacceptable in combat. and there are other issues that are classified. Regarding mission systems, the program has now changed its approach, as has been discussed, from executing parallel schedule-driven software releases to a serial capability-based approach, which does take longer, but that approach has been validated in the recent achievement of improved stability with the TR2 processor. That approach, the new approach, allows for the extra time needed to actually fix problems, and as I mentioned, has been validated by the progress recently seen. Stealth aircraft are not invisible. Mission systems and fusion must work in some reasonable sense of that word. They don't have to be perfect, but they have to, in some sense of the word, work to prevail in combat against the modern, very capable, and mobile integrated air defense systems potential adversaries have been fielding since the middle of last decade. The ability to prevail against these threats is a key rationale for this $400 billion program. To continue with other reasons that there may be a delay in operational testing. Time is needed to complete and certify full weapons usage throughout the full flight envelope. The most recent test community estimates are October 2017 for F-35A, February 2018 for F-35C, and May 2018 for F-35B. And these estimates assume an increase in the rate at which weapons tests are accomplished that may be a challenge to achieve. As has been mentioned, there are problems that continue with the Autonomic Logistics Information System, or ALIS, which remains immature, requiring problematic and resource-intensive workarounds not acceptable in combat. Under the program's current schedule, the final version of ALIS 3.0, the full capability production version required for IOT&E and full combat capability, will not be released until the first quarter of calendar year 2018, but this schedule could be delayed by the ongoing problems with ALIS version 2.0.2, which attempts to integrate the engine data and incorporate other functionality and fixes. Concurrency-driven extensive modifications would be required to the early lot aircraft that had originally been bought for IOT&E when IOT&E was planned to begin in 2013. The current unmitigated schedule for accomplishing those modifications, including those for the gun, which is turning out to be very problematic on all variants, extends into the third quarter of 2019. The program is working on a multi-pronged approach to pull those modifications to the left that includes taking production aircraft slated for operational use and taking hardware from recently fielded aircraft, and a decision on that approach, a definitive decision, is needed now. There are inadequacies that remain in the U.S. reprogramming laboratory that are precluding the ability to generate combat-effective mission data files, enabling aircraft to deal with the air defense threats I mentioned, and that are only going to worsen in the future. Current schedule shows USRL hardware upgrades required to handle current threats extend into calendar year 2020. The program can and has delivered mission data files, but they are not optimized or fully tested to handle the current threat because of the hardware and software deficiencies in the USRL. The program's optimistic schedule for delivery of a validated but probably inadequate MDF to support IOT&E is the first quarter of 2018, but this assumes the USRL receives a functional lab version of Block 3F this month, which may be problematic. For all these reasons, delays to IOT&E and full combat capability are likely, and I want to remind everyone that IOT&E will constitute the most realistic and stressing test of JSF that will be performed. Therefore, discovery of new significant deficiencies during IOT&E, as was the case with F-22, is pretty much assured. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman McCain, Senator Reid, members of the committee. I have a written statement for the record, but I'd like to just take this time to briefly highlight what we consider to be the most important challenges facing the program moving forward. In addition to my written statement, our report to this committee and others, which was issued on April 14th, contains more details on the program's progress to date. First, although the program has managed cost very well since its Nunn-McCurdy breach and subsequent rebaselining in 2012, it still poses significant future affordability challenges for the Department and the Congress. As the program begins procuring more aircraft, the Department is expected to spend, on average, about $13 billion per year over the next 22 years, until all planned purchases are complete in 2040. These annual funding levels will present challenges as the program stacks its funding priorities against other large acquisitions, including the B-21 bomber, KC-46 tanker, the Ohio-class submarine replacement, the new carrier, and many more. Second, the department now plans to add new capability known as Block 4 to the F-35 that is beyond its original baseline capability, and it is planning to manage that effort as part of the existing program rather than establishing a separate business case and baseline for that effort. This has significant implications as far as the Congress' ability to provide oversight and holding the program accountable. The new work has a projected cost of about $3 billion over just the next 6 years, and that price tag alone would qualify it as a major defense acquisition program in its own right. We believe it should be managed as such with its own separate business case to allow for transparency and accountability. Third, the F-35 software development is nearing completion, but the program faces challenges in getting all of its development activity completed on time for operational testing, as we just heard Dr. Gilmore talk about. It has completed over 80% of its developmental flight tests and is now working to close out flight testing of its final block of software, Block 3F. This final block is critical as it will provide the full warfighting capabilities to the aircraft. Program officials have estimated as much as a 3-month delay right now to completing Block 3F testing, and our own analysis indicates that it could be closer to 6 months. I think Dr. Gilmore's analysis, as he just stated, has it more than that. Getting that the developmental testing done is critical, of course, to getting operational testing done and IOCing the aircraft. With regard to technical risk, the program has found fixes for earlier problems such as the helmet display and the engine, and it's working now to find solutions for 2 other challenges, the ejection seat problem and the carrier variant's wing structure. There's cracks in the wing structure. Perhaps the biggest outstanding technical risk for the program today, though, as has been discussed already, is the Autonomic Logistics Information System known as ALIS. As you know, ALIS is a complex system that supports operations, mission planning, supply chain management, maintenance, and many other processes. In our companion report, also issued on April 14th, we documented several issues with ALIS, most importantly concerning its inability to deploy right now and a lack of needed redundancy at this point that could result in operational and schedule risks in the future. Finally, manufacturing and production data continue to show a positive trend towards more efficient production, and that's good. The amount of labor hours to build each aircraft continues to go down. The engineering changes that are coming out of the test program have been reduced significantly, and the contractor is now delivering aircraft on time or, in some cases, ahead of schedule. We continue to monitor the measures for aircraft and engine reliability and maintainability, and while they still fall short of expectations, they continue to improve, and there is still time to achieve the program's required goals in that area. I will close with that, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. I thank the witnesses. General Bogdan, how many military, government, civilians, and full-time equivalent contractor positions are assigned to the Joint Program Office, and what are the annual costs to operate the office?
Sir, today, if you include the test force at Pax River and the test force at Edwards Air Force Base, which are not necessarily part of my program office, but I pay for them just like I do support contractors, the number is about 2,590. And the annual cost to operate the JPO is on the order of about $70 million a year. And that includes pay for salaries, that includes leasing facilities in space, computers, IT, everything wrapped up.
The information that I have is it's nearly 3,000 and the cost is $300 million a year. Maybe you can, but $70 million a year to run an office is, of a program is pretty disturbing. Secretary Kendall, last year's NDAA included report language that direct the Secretary of Defense to either revalidate the F-35 total by quantity of 2,443 for all variants, or submit a new number by May 25th, 2016. Does the department intend on meeting this requirement on time?
Mr. Chairman, as far as I know, yes, we are.
I was interested, Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Gilmore, you said that the IOC is likely to be delayed. Have you any idea of how long that delay would be in the IOC?
Are you speaking, Mr. Chairman, about the IOC for the Air Force with Block 3I?
Yes.
I think it's unlikely the Air Force will meet its objective date, which is mid-2017 or mid-2016, but it could meet its threshold date, which is later in the fall.
In this issue, Mr. Sullivan, of the pursuing a block buy, can you provide any examples of a program pursuing a block buy or multi-year procurement strategy prior to full rate production decision?
You're referring to the kind of the proposal right now to buy aircraft in a 3-year buy?
Yes.
No, I don't have any examples of that. The only example I know of a block buy situation is our usual multi-year procurements, which require a lot of criteria to show that the industrial base is stable, the design is stable, they're ready to produce. Usually it comes much later in a production line. So I've never heard, I don't think there's even any criteria for that kind of a block buy.
Dr. Gilmore, in your statement, you said the limited and incomplete F-35 cybersecurity testing accomplished to date has nonetheless revealed deficiencies that cannot be ignored. Can you elaborate on that?
I'd be happy to do so in the appropriate forum. It would require the discussion of classified information. We treat cyber vulnerabilities as the details of them as classified, but they are significant in my judgment.
General Bogdan, Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Gilmore believes that there will be a delay in the IOC of the Air Force version. Well, what's your response?
So there's many things that the Air Force needs me to deliver to them before they can declare IOC. All of the things that are necessary for them to make that decision are on track for a 1 August 2016 declaration, with the exception of Alice. I believe Alice is approximately 60 days behind, and therefore I would put Alice delivery, which is a criteria for them, at about 1 October 2016 as opposed to 1 August. They have until December, which is their threshold date, so I think they will meet their IOC criteria within that period, but not exactly on 1 August.
The fiscal year 2016, General, limited funds for the procurement of F-35As until Secretary James certified that the F-35A aircraft delivered in 2018 will have the full combat capability with Block 3F hardware, software, and weapons carriage. Have you recommended, or do you intend to recommend to Secretary James that she make the certification?
Yes, Senator. I am preparing the package now to forward to the Secretary of the Air Force with my recommendation that she make that certification. I needed a few pieces of information before I could feel confident asking her to certify, and one of those pieces was that the software stability issues that were spoken about before were behind us. I believe they are now. Therefore, I believe that 3F will be delivered in fiscal year 2018 with the full capability, so I will forward that package to her now.
Finally, Dr. Gilmore, given the size of and cost of Block 4, would you believe that it should be treated as a separate program for non-McCurdy purposes, or as part of just as part of the F-35 program?
Well, Senator, I remind you that's not my decision. However, in taking a look at what I've seen in the current plans for Block 4, as I mentioned in my written statement, they need to be scrubbed rigorously, in my view. And so anything that will help in that rigorous scrub and bring clarity to performance, desired performance, and cost would be useful. So I think that would be a good idea, but again, I'd hasten to say it's not my decision.
Senator Reed, thank the witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to yield to Senator Donnelly. He has a pressing engagement elsewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses. Secretary Kendall, from 1996 to 2007, as the F-35 was under development, DoD supported an alternate engine program. The push for the F-136 engine was controversial in later years, but I'm interested to hear from you and others who have thoughts on this. Do you believe the alternate engine program was a smart strategy in those early R&D years?
The question of the alternate engine, and I was in my position for the last couple of years of that debate, was really a question of the economics associated with it. Basically, a decision was made that the economic case was not there to carry a second engine. That entails taking some risk, of course, when you only rely on one. That's proven out. The engine, the F-135, is performing. We're getting cost out of that, not as quickly or as much as we'd like, but we think that the strategy we've embarked on is working. We are also funding some advanced development for follow-on engines. That's competitive development at this point. That could be cut into the production several years from now if we could fund an EMD program for that. But affordability has been a major constraint on the program overall, including on the engines.
General Bogdan, I'm particularly concerned about the performance of the F-135, given that Pratt & Whitney was recently selected to build the engine for the B-21. I'm concerned that looking back on the history of the F-35, the F-16, and others, there's performance issues, and I quote from the Department of Defense's annual report, recurring manufacturing quality issues that have been an issue with Pratt & Whitney for the F-35. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, sir. The quality issues that you're talking about are primarily not at the Pratt & Whitney level. They're at their suppliers level. Nonetheless, Pratt & Whitney is responsible for those suppliers. Over the last few years, we have improved our on-time delivery of engines significantly, but early on in the program, you are correct, sir, that we were seeing quality escapes and manufacturing issues with the lower tier suppliers. I think at this point in time, the manufacturing of the engine is much more mature than it was a few years ago. Relative to the performance of the engine, today the F-135 engine has about 52,000 fleet hours on it, and it's maintaining about a 94% full mission capable rate. That is a very, very good number. In the end game of the program, we were shooting for 95%. So here we are, less than a quarter of the way through the full maturity of the airplane, and we're just about achieving that reliability we're looking for. However, that's not to say that there are issues we're dealing with the engine right now and changes we're making to make it more affordable, more producible, and to increase the reliability. But from that perspective, I've been fairly happy with the performance of the F-135.
Mr. Sullivan, they've talked that their engines are well ahead of 2020 requirements, but in your report last month, GAO wrote that the F-35A and 35B engines are at about 55 and 63% of where the program expected them to be. Can you explain the difference in that assessment, sir?
I don't know that I can explain the cause of that, but we have found that the engine reliability and the measurements that we look at in terms of coming up a reliability growth curve for an engine during development, Pratt & Whitney has been pretty consistently below where they had expected to be, but I would say they've been improving in the last 2 or 3 years in that respect. Seems like they're beginning to retire some of that risk.
This is to all the panelists. What's the top lesson you've learned through the F-35 acquisition process that can inform future major acquisitions across the services? Mr. Sullivan, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I think obviously the first thing that we've learned with this is that you shouldn't concurrently develop technology with a product, and you shouldn't concurrently buy aircraft while you're still developing them. That's the number one thing.
Dr. Gilmore?
The F-35 was an extreme example of optimistic, if not ridiculous, assumptions about how a program would play out. The decision to begin production before much of development had really been accomplished was a very bad one, as Mr. Kendall has discussed. But although an extreme example, it's not unprecedented because the Department is typically very optimistic about schedules and costs, which then sets up the program managers who put in charge of these programs to look like failures from the outset, which is a terrible thing to do to them.
Well, thank you. I'd love to hear the other two, but I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the question that I was going to ask may have been answered in the second sentence in your opening statement when it says the F-35 will form the backbone of U.S. air combat superiority for decades to come. We keep hearing things to the contrary. You might remember when the Secretary Hagel, that was just in February of 14, he said, quote, "American dominance in the seas, in the skies, and in space can no longer be taken for granted." General Frank Corinth, the USAFE commander, said just September of last year, and this is his quote, "The advantage that we had from the air, I can honestly say, is shrinking. This is not just a Pacific problem. It's a significant, it is as significant in Europe as it is anywhere else on the planet. I don't think it's controversial to say they've closed the gap in capability." General Bogdan, do you agree with that?
Sir, I'd agree with that. Our adversaries today are full speed ahead and accelerating the development of significant military capabilities to thwart ours, both in air-to-air and air-to-ground. I believe the F-35 is absolutely necessary now and in the future to give you and the nation options to take an airplane and go anywhere on the face of the earth at a time of our choosing and be survivable and hit a target. I do not believe there's any other airplane in the world that can do that today. I believe the F-35 can do it and will do it for many years.
Well, you're talking about some fifth-generation aircraft from both Russia and China. You have the T-50, and then the Chinese have the J-20. I think they also have the J-31 or something like that, maybe lagged behind a little bit. Now, when you compare those, normally they talk about we're going to be stealthier, we're going to be have better radar. Why don't you give us an idea of what the opposition is doing right now and how specifically what areas we are better?
Senator, I'll try and do that without walking across the line of sensitive information or classified. One of the things that folks like to think about when they look at those adversary airplanes is that they look a lot like ours. That is a true statement. Much of the design of those airplanes came on the outer mold line from what we've developed in our F-22s and our F-35s.
I understand that, yes.
What makes us better and special is what's on the inside of these airplanes. Our radar, our multi-sensor fusion, our ability to take information in the battle space and provide it to the pilot in such a way that he knows everything that's going on 360 degrees around him.
Okay, that's good.
And the weapons.
That's good.
And the weapons to employ that knowledge are what makes it different.
Well, that's good. You know, recently they're talking about, and some pretty high individuals talking about the fact that on the F-22s, you know, they're really using those a lot more than we anticipated for anybody here. And yet, in your presentations, you talk pretty specifically about the numbers of copies we're going to have of the A's, B's, and the C's. It's most of us here on this side of the table remember we went through this thing with the F-22s. Originally, it was going to be 750, then it was going to be 380 some, then 187 ultimately. Now, that's quite a deterioration from the original numbers. Is there a reason that you don't believe we're going to experience the same thing with the F-35?
Sir, I can't assume in the future what the U.S. services will do.
Yeah.
But what I will tell you is that the major difference between an F-22 type program and the F-35 program are significant in that we have many FMS and foreign partners who are also buying the airplane. And if they continue to buy the airplane, the price will continue to come down.
Yeah, yeah.
So that stabilizes.
And that's where you come up with the 85 million ultimately, taking that into consideration.
Yes, sir.
One last thing, we were all a little disturbed 2 years ago, and we thought we were going to have I think it was a B model at Farnborough, and last minute we had to bag it. And of course, we didn't have anything at France in Paris. Are you pretty confident we're going to have? It's going to make the Farnborough this year?
Yes, sir. We are planning a deployment of five F-35s to Farnborough and Rio, 2 A models and 3 B models, one of those being a UK airplane.
And how many of those would be flying?
We will fly all of those airplanes at Farnborough and Rio.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gilmore, I just want to clarify one of your comments. You were talking about, I think, the difficulty of operating with 4 aircraft and essentially the multi-sensor fusion of the 4 aircraft operating together, and that seems to be the preferred form of operation. Is that an accurate sort of recollection?
Yes. 4-ship will often be used because that will provide information from 4 aircraft that must be fused in order to provide the situational awareness that General Bogdan just mentioned is so critical to dealing with future threats and current threats.
And there is a current difficulty in making those systems, even if they operate in a single aircraft, operate effectively together when
Fusion has been a challenge to make work well. It will, based on what I've seen, continue to be a challenge. It's a very hard problem. It doesn't surprise me that it's turning out to be a hard problem and to make the fusion work well, because you get information from different sensors on the same aircraft as well as from different aircraft. You have to have software that then sorts through all that and says, this signal that I got from this sensor is from the same target as this sensor on another aircraft. That's a very hard physics problem. It's not a matter of just simply, writing code for a graphical user interface. It involves a detailed understanding of the physics of the propagation of the signals and so forth, and the errors in the signals. So that's going to continue to be a challenge, and it will require a lot of iterative test, fix, test, where you guess at solutions and then use subject matter experts to guess at solutions, try to implement them, test them to see how they work. That's a time-consuming process.
Just a clarification, in the IOC status, do you really get into that multi-aircraft fusion issue, or is that just simply the aircraft being able to fly, essentially?
Well, the Air Force is the one, just as the Marines did for their own initial operational capability. The Air Force sets the standards for determining what constitutes sufficient performance for IOC. I can't remember the details of what the Air Force has said about fusion, but obviously the more fusion capability they have, the better. It will be limited because Block 3I provides the same basic capability that Block 2B did with the new processor, and there were fusion shortfalls in Block 2B that Block 3F is meant to surmount.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, from your perspective, what do you think the most significant challenges are? I know General Bogdan talked about Alice as a key issue in terms of resolution. Any others that you would identify you're focused on in your sort of approach to deal with them?
I think Alice is kind of the leading problem in terms of achieving IOC for the Air Force on time. The issue that was mentioned earlier on stability, I think, was a concern, but that seems to be getting under control. There are a number of concerns with just the pace of testing and how much has to be done, and I know some steps General Bogdan is taking to alleviate some of that schedule pressure that he has. So I think it's a suite of a lot of things that have to happen. At the end of the day, the Air Force will make the decision as to when they think it's ready to declare IOC. My experience with the Marine Corps, I think the Air Force will be exactly the same, is they're not going to do that until they're comfortable with the product that they have.
One of the major issues long-term is the sustainment cost of the aircraft, which seem to be quite significant. Can you describe steps that you and General Bogdan are taking to lower those costs. We want to lower the cost of the platform, but we certainly like to lower the cost long-term of maintenance and operation.
So far, we've been able to take about 10% out of the cost estimate at the time of the rebaselining. A variety of things to do that. We're looking at various ways to structure the business case, if you will, for the sustainment. And that's work that's still in progress. We don't want to remain in a sole source environment for any more of that than we possibly have to. So introducing competition is a big part of it. We're looking for creative ways to work with our partners so that we do things together as opposed to separately, because there are cost efficiencies associated with that. And General Bogdan, I think, probably has a very long list he could give you in addition to that.
You give me your top 2 or 3, General.
Yes, sir. We started a fully funded reliability and maintainability program about 2 years ago, where we looked at each and every component on the F-35 to determine if it was maintaining its performance on the airplane at the pace at which we needed it. That has proven to be very cost-effective for us, so we're going after those pieces and parts on the airplane that aren't performing well. We also have a cost war room where we look at every idea that comes from the field on how to better maintain the airplane. Perfect example of that is the original concept for tires, wheels, and brakes on this airplane was to ship all that off to a contractor somewhere. The U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Marine Corps have that capability today with their legacy systems at their bases. So we're moving all of that work to them. That reduces about 40 or 50% of the cost and the turn time of fixing things like that. So we are going about systematically trying to get every piece of cost out of the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Chairman. General Bogdan, I wanted to ask you, recently General Welch came before our committee and said that the mission capability of the A-10 will not be replaced by the F-35, yet the website for the Joint Strike Fighter program says that the F-35 will replace the A-10. So can you answer this question for us? There's an inconsistency there, and I would like to know, is General Welch right, or is your website right?
Thank you for that question, ma'am. First, the force structure of the U.S. Air Force and its fighter inventory is well beyond my purview. So I won't try and explain what General Welch said or what the decision-making process is for the Air Force on replacing their fighter inventory.
But General, I think this is an important question. So if General Welch comes before our committee and says the F-35A is not going to replace the A-10, and yet the Joint Strike Fighter website says that the F-35A will replace the A-10, pretty important as we think about the capabilities of the A-10. Secretary Kendall?
Yeah, I can't speak for certain for General Welch, but I think what he was trying to say was that we will, in fact, first of all, both statements I think are correct. We will, in fact, replace the A-10.
Both statements can't be correct.
Well, we will, in fact, replace the A-10s with F-35s. That is the plan. But the F-35 will not do close air support mission the same way the A-10 does. It will do it very differently. The A-10 was designed to be low and slow and close to the targets that it was engaging, relatively speaking. We will not use the F-35 in the same way as the A-10, so it will perform the mission very differently.
So let me ask Dr. Gilmore, so if it's going to perform the mission very differently, is it not important that we understand how the two compare? And so I would ask you, how will there be comparison testing, not just with the A-10, but with other comparative airframes that the F-35 is going to replace? And how will the operational testing comparing the close air support capabilities of the F-35A and A-10 be conducted?
Okay. Senator, if I could just point out, I have here the operational requirements document for F-35, and on page 2 it says the F-35A will rely primarily upon the F-22 for air superiority and will assume the current F-16 role as the low end of the USAF high-low fighter mix strategy and the A-10 role. So that's in the operational requirements document.
Okay, so if it's going to perform the A-10 role, it's a pretty darn important role to our men and women on the ground. So what about the fly-off?
Yeah.
How will that go down?
We are going to do a comparative test of the ability of the F-35 to perform close air support, combat search and rescue, and related missions with the A-10. We're also going to do a comparison test as an integral part of operational test and evaluation of the ability of the F-35 to perform suppression and destruction of enemy air defenses with the F-16 and the F-18. This operational requirements document has numerous citations to the performance expected at F-35 in relationship to the aircraft it's going to replace. So that operational testing is entirely consistent with the operational requirements document. It's also, the comparison testing is also not unprecedented. There was comparison testing between the F-22 and the F-15. And there's been comparison testing as part of other operational tests, including things like tactical vehicles, like the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle and the Humvee. So to me, comparison testing just makes common sense.
Of course.
If you're spending a lot of money to get improved capability, that's the easiest way to demonstrate it, is to do a rigorous comparison test. And with regard to CAS, we're going to do it under all the circumstances that we see CAS conducted, including under high threat conditions in which we expect F-35 will have an advantage, and other conditions requiring loitering on the target, low altitude operations and so forth, in which there are a lot of arguments that ensue about which aircraft might have the advantage, the A-10 or the F-35, but that's what the comparison test is meant to show us.
Well, I think that's really important so that we can understand the capability comparisons there. So, General Bogdan, I wanted to ask you, I had asked a question of General Welsh in March as to when do you expect the SDB-2 to achieve a demonstrated full mission capability for the F-35A?
Ma'am, our program of record has the SDB-1 coming in the end of Block 3F, which is in the 2017 timeframe, but SDB-2, which is a much more enhanced capability for that precision weapon, is planned for the first increment of our Block 4, and that's approximately in the 2021-22 timeframe.
Okay, I think that's an important issue as well, because the SDB-2 provides F-35A an ability to kill mobile targets in adverse weather, which is something that obviously the A-10 has capability on. So I hope that is taken into consideration as we look at this comparison.
The comparison testing will be done with mobile targets and targets in close proximity to buildings and civilian structures, but in particular with mobile targets. And as I mentioned, right now, the mobile target capability of the F-35 is problematic, and how much it will be corrected as we get to Block 3F remains to be seen. SDB-2 in 2022 will provide a weapon that can actually follow the target. Before that, in 2020, laser JDAM also may help in that regard, but the current moving target capability is limited.
I know my time is up, but one of the things that continues to worry me is under the Air Force's plan, the A-10s were all retired by 2022, and seems to me that these are still important questions that remain that very much matter to our men and women on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for your service. General Bogdan, the GAO's report recommends an approach in which new development efforts are managed as separate acquisition programs. GAO recommended that this type of separate acquisition program for the F-35 Block 4 follow on modernization efforts. However, DoD has not concurred with the GAO's recommendations and plans to include the F-35's Block 4 follow-on modernization efforts under the existing cost plus contracts. So if DoD did not adopt GAO's recommendation, would that help eliminate cost plus for the Block 4 phase of the program? Why would they not? And why, I don't know why any of us don't pay attention to GAO, but why the Department of Defense doesn't makes no sense at all.
Sir, at a strategy level, I'm going to defer to Mr. Kendall to answer that part.
Secretary, I'm sorry.
Senator, I think we're talking about a distinction here that may not have a difference. The label MDAP, or Major Defense Acquisition Program, brings with it a lot of statutory and regulatory oversight. What we plan to do with Block 4 is ensure that it is accounted for separately, that we have an independent cost estimate, that we manage it very intensively, there's this full transparency and visibility into what we're doing.
But I'm saying that
All the things that I think were being asked for will be supplied. But if we add to that the label of a major defense acquisition program, that's going to bring a lot of additional bureaucracy and cost. And I was hoping to avoid that.
Well, I'd agree, we don't want to put any more bureaucracy on top of you that you already have, but why would, then I would ask Mr. Sullivan, why would the GAO make that report if you thought it was going to throw more
One of the reasons,
bureaucracy on top of it?
yeah, we wouldn't want to see any bureaucracy on top of that either.
Right.
And in fact, we did a report last year looking, we kind of call it our efficiency report. I know the Undersecretary is familiar with it and agrees with a lot of it, I think. And so one of the things we're also attacking when we attack these kind of accountability questions is let's reduce some of that bureaucracy that they have to deal with if they become an MDAP. But the reason we think it's important here is, number one, the dollars involved are such that even according to current law, that they meet the threshold for an MDAP program. The other thing is on the F-22 program, we saw something very similar to this. When they decided to baseline new capabilities into the program, they did it under the existing program, and very quickly a $2 billion estimate for development of those new capabilities became about $11 billion. And there was no track over it, there was no accountability over it because it was, you know, in with the baseline program.
Well, I mean, first of all, I appreciate the job the GAO does, I really do.
Thank you.
I have to make apologies why we don't take your recommendations more seriously. You must have considered if the bureaucracy versus the cost as far as the contract versus cost plus had to be significant savings.
Yes, and we sympathize with the desire to not have to go through so many reviews.
I got you.
And so many offices and comments and everything else, and we did the report on that, and it was eye-opening for us to see what they have to go through. But to me, that is not, they said that it would, if they had to go to a major defense acquisition program, it would cause a year's delay in getting that development effort going, and I just don't understand why that would be the case. They're doing many of the things that they'd be required to do under an MDAP anyway.
Let me go on. Yesterday it was announced that we are sending 250 special operations forces to Syria. I understand that it costs us approximately $1 million to $1.5 million to train one special operator, equaling to roughly $375 million for the 250. General, you indicated recently that the F-35 currently costs $108 per million per aircraft. I know it's going to come down to 85, you're hoping by 2019. Conceptually, if we traded in 10 jets, just 10, we could increase the size of our special forces community by over 650. Now, this is after General Milne came here and said that we're about 220,000 short of in-strength ground troops. So we're looking for ways to make sure that we can meet the imminent threats that we have. The F-35 pilot's helmet alone costs $400,000. That's $10 million for 2,500. As we look at the costs associated with F-35 and considering the current threats we are facing and how most of it is ground threats that we're facing, enforcing, and fighting, does it make sense to spend so much money on F-35 while we currently depend so much more on our special op forces around the world, since we have to make some choices?
Senator, what I will tell you is that the department has many different kinds of choices that they have to make and try and balance their requirements with the resources that they have. I will tell you that the F-35 is a long-term investment in the defense of this nation. And our future adversaries are not sitting still. And in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we may very well need the capabilities that the F-35 will provide us to maintain our leadership in the world. So I consider the F-35 as an investment in the future.
No, and I appreciate that, and my time is up, but I'm saying we have 2,500 scheduled to be built, correct? Is that the number?
The U.S. services will build 2,443, sir.
So just for 10 less aircraft, we could put 650 special ops people on the front lines right now.
I believe your math is right, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Dr. Gilmore, in your prepared testimony, you state that cybersecurity testing has revealed deficiencies and that full testing of the logistics operating unit and the logistics information system has not been permitted. Can you give us an overview of the planned cybersecurity tests and whether, based on the deficiencies discovered so far, you believe the testing will be adequate?
If we execute the plan that my office has been working on with the Joint Operational Test Team and the Program Office over the next couple of years, that will be a very thorough, rigorous set of cybersecurity tests. The problems that we're running into, as you mentioned, are that the program is reluctant to let us test on the live systems for fear that we might damage them, and they had not made provisions for backup if the systems went down, although they are working on that now. So up to this point and in the immediate future, we will have to test on surrogate systems and laboratory systems. The Program Office is making those available to us, and that's certainly better than foregoing all testing, and we are learning from that, as is mentioned in my annual report and in my statement. But we need to do much more than that. We need to test on the live systems. We're also going to have to find a way to do some sort of cybersecurity system assessment of Lockheed systems, information systems, because Alice is plugged into the Lockheed corporate network. And we're working through all those issues. Over the next couple of years, I expect that we will have done very adequate, rigorous testing. But we are just at the beginning of it.
And General, how's the program office working to address these issues? The doctor mentioned some accommodations there, but there's still the need for the live testing. How are you addressing all of this?
Yes, ma'am. What I will tell you, today Alice, our logistics information system, is operating on the DoD networks. And in order for me to be allowed to put the Alice system on the DoD networks, it has gone through, over the last 3 or 4 years, vigorous cybersecurity testing and certification from agencies outside the JPO, to include the NSA and DISA. So the idea that the Alice system today is somehow untested is not an accurate statement. However, having said that, Dr. Gilmore is correct. I was hesitant last year to give the operational test community the authority to test end-to-end the operational system because we didn't have redundancy in part of the system. And if the testing were to knock off that part of the system, I didn't have a backup. We are building that backup today, and as soon as that backup is in place, we will give the operational test community full authority to test the system as it operates in the field today. And that should happen before the end of the year.
When do you anticipate? Oh, before the end.
Before the end of the year, ma'am.
I would just like to comment, Senator, that we do operational testing as an integral part, or cybersecurity testing is an integral part of operational testing of systems that have been through DIACAP certifications and NSA certifications, and we get into them every time. So I'm not arguing against those certifications, which are specification-based kinds of assessments. They're certainly necessary, but they're hardly sufficient. And commercial organizations such as Microsoft have said in their advice, the advice they provide to their customers, assume that you have been penetrated and do continual red teaming, which is what we do in our operational tests. So the certifications that the General talks about are certainly necessary, but they're hardly sufficient.
And Mr. Secretary, overall, what are the lessons learned from this process? What are we applying to other acquisitions, and how is cybersecurity going to be included in the requirements process? Basically, what are we doing to integrate requirements for cybersecurity into the whole acquisitions process?
Cybersecurity is both a ubiquitous and basically an omnipresent problem. Our guidance to the acquisition workforce basically is that you have to take cybersecurity into account throughout every phase of the product development and product life cycle and every aspect of it. The department is maturing its capabilities in this area, but I think it's in agreement with Dr. Gilmore on this, we still have a long ways to go. Some of our older systems that are in the field were not designed with cybersecurity in mind. We have to go back and assess those and take corrective action on those. And all of our systems like the F-35 that are in development, we have to integrate it into the design process as we go, as well as into all of our business practices. It is a pervasive threat. I worry particularly about loss of unclassified information, which is much easier to extract and attack. In a logistics system, that's a particular problem because you want to connect to the internet somehow so you can order parts and so on. So we are working this problem very, very hard. It is not going to be cheap to fix it, and it is not going to be quick to fix it, but we have to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the Chairman, Senator Cotton, please.
Thank you. I know that Senator Donnelly asked about lessons learned from the F-35 program and what we might take forward into other programs, given that some of the challenges of this program go back to some members' high school years. I think we only got through Mr. Sullivan and Dr. Gilmore, though. I would like to hear the answer to that question from Secretary Kendall and General Bogdan.
I was thinking as my colleagues were answering, I think it's a combination of things. But at the end of the day, having a successful program depends on a handful of things, but they're all incredibly difficult and complicated. It starts with reasonable requirements. Then you have to have professional management that is empowered to do its job. You have to have adequate resources. And you have to have a system that basically will support people doing the right thing. In our system, as I think others mentioned, there's a very strong bias that's sort of built into our incentive structure towards optimism. It's easier to get a program funded if it costs less. People want everything to faster, and they want it cheaper, and they want it to be able to do more. Most of the problems I've seen in acquisition stem from being in a hurry and being convinced for whatever reason that things will be cheaper, better, faster than they will actually be, or that history would indicate that they would be. My office was formed in 1986 because this problem was so pervasive. And I think we've had, frankly, a mixed record of success. One of the things that I hope I've done over the last several years is to put more realism and more, is to structure programs with a more highly likelihood of success. A lot of the things we do, like F-35, are incredibly complicated and difficult. Development is inherently very risky. When you create something that's never been created for, and you do it with cutting-edge technology, that is a process that inherently has a lot of unknowns in it, no matter how much risk reduction you do ahead of time. So I think support for sound management, ensuring that professionals are in place, resisting the tendency to spend the money just because it's in your budget, and you're afraid you'll lose it if you don't spend it, which I think is exactly what happened when we started production of the F-35, is something that has to be reinforced throughout the chain of command, starting with the Secretary of Defense.
General Bogdan.
Thank you, Senator. I won't elaborate. The concurrency and the optimism piece are given. I'll give you two other things, sir. When you set up a large acquisition program like this, you must ensure that the risk between industry and government is balanced appropriately. If the risk is all on the government, or if the risk is all on industry, you will get bad behaviors from both sides. So it is very, very important to make sure you have the incentive structures right and the risk balanced appropriately between the government and industry. We did not get that right at the early part of the F-35 program. Mr. Kendall, under his leadership, I have been trying to do that for a number of years now, and it has proven to be helpful. The second thing I would tell you that people do not talk about much is leadership continuity. If you have a very large program and very complex like the F-35, it will do you no good to put leaders in place that are there for only 2 or 3 years. It takes them a year just to understand what's going on. I would tell you our bigger acquisition programs need stable leadership at the top for many, many years to help.
Are you talking about uniformed leadership or civilian leadership?
Either one, sir. They're both, I believe, government civilians and military personnel are both very capable acquisition leaders. You just got to leave them there in place for enough time to make a difference.
To the extent it's uniform leadership, is that an acquisition challenge or is that a personnel challenge?
It is both, sir. It is absolutely both. How do you provide the incentives for a military person to continue moving up in rank if you leave him in a job for 5 or 6 years? But that's sometimes what's necessary for very big, complex acquisition programs.
I've heard from some of our partners overseas, and I don't mean just partners in the Joint Strike Fighter, but our security partners generally, when talking about acquiring certain weapon systems that because they're small compared to the United States, they worry about being a plane with a country rather than a country with a plane. What's the risk that some of the partners in this program face in terms of the cost of this aircraft and the ability to acquire the number of aircraft needed to contribute meaningfully to the program? I mean, how many Joint Strike Fighters need a country acquire to have a meaningful contribution to their defense?
That's an interesting question, Senator, and I think it really goes to what each country cares about in terms of its resources and what they care to defend. What I will tell you is even our smallest nations on the F-35 program are looking at least 2 squadrons of F-35s. And the idea that the partnership will be working together to sustain, maintain, and train the airplanes is a huge deal for them, because otherwise they could not afford a 5th-generation capability like they are today.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Chairman, Senator Rounds.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Gilmore, I'm concerned by your testimony that the Marine Corps found they weren't able to achieve aircraft repair capabilities at the unit or intermediate levels that would support expeditionary warfare. Can you expand on this and give your assessment as to whether ALICE, or the Automatic Logistics Information System, is mature enough to support the sustained operations with a land or ship-based forward deployed squadron of F-35s at this time?
At this time, it is not sufficiently mature. There are a number of improvements that are planned as the program moves forward to what's called ALICE 3.0, the fully capable version that's meant to be available for operational testing and full operational capability. If those improvements are realized, they will address a number of the issues that are mentioned in my testimony. But currently, there are immaturities in the system. There are lots of time-consuming workarounds that are required in order to keep aircraft flying. There's a heavy reliance on having contractors present. Again, when we move forward to ALICE 3.0, the plan is to fix many of those problems. There's also a concern that I think General Bogdan alluded to when he was talking about tires, that there's still too much reliance on sending parts back rather than repairing them closer to the front lines. But again, the program is working on those issues, and so we'll see how well ALICE 3.0 does when we get to operational testing. My estimate will be in 2018.
Lieutenant General Bogdan, can you comment on Dr. Gilmore's assertion that with the current number of aircraft planned for testing use, an 80% aircraft availability rate is needed to efficiently accomplish the integrated operational test and evaluation on schedule? What would you assess is the current aircraft availability rate? And does the JPO's current projections estimate that the aircraft availability rate will be up to 80% by the time the IOT&E is scheduled to start? It seems as though right now you're not making that, and yet you're going to have more challenges between now and then to meet that. How are we going to meet the testing guidelines that are laid out in order to meet the deadlines that you've laid out? Doesn't appear as though it's possible. Can you comment on that and give us your thoughts, please?
Yes, sir. I'm not quite sure where the 80% comes from, but I think if you take the number of airplanes...
in order to have the number of aircraft, just for the number of hours and the number of tests you got to do, you got to have 80% of them operational.
To finish
you
IOT&E
haven't done
within a
that
year. To finish IOT&E within a year. You're correct, sir. I do not believe we will by the time IOT&E starts get anywhere near 80%. Today, the fleet is hovering around 60% aircraft availability. The best we've seen so far is the U.S. Air Force airplanes at Hill Air Force Base. When they deployed to Mountain Home this winter, they achieved about a 72% aircraft availability rate. What we have seen is our newer airplanes are doing much better. But I will tell you it is very unlikely that we would get to 80%. So what that means is IOT&E may take longer than we anticipated. And that would be the major result of that.
That's interesting. We've talked a little bit, and I'm going to follow up on Senator Ayotte's questions a little bit concerning the A-10. As I look back to the information that's been provided for us, if you compare the two aircraft today, the A-10 time on station, hour to an hour and a half, F-35B,
And this is, from what I can see, the planned operational capabilities of 25 to 40 minutes on station. With weapons, the A-10, 4 air-to-surface weapons, F-35B, under the 2B software, 2 air-to-surface weapons, under the 3F, 6 air-to-surface weapons. The fuel burn under the F-35A and B, 10 to 20% higher than an F-16, 50 to 70% higher than an A-10, which would suggest that we're also going to need additional capabilities just to service them close by those areas. On the gun itself, the F-35, and this is the way it was designed in the first place, apparently. F-35 apparently wasn't designing with a gun in mind, a lightweight 25mm cannon, 402 rounds total, or about a 4-second burst. A-10, a 30mm cannon, 1,150 total rounds, 17 seconds. And an A-10 round is double the weight of that carried by the F-35. Clearly, when we talk about having a similar mission, we're talking about doing the job in completely different ways. Would that be a fair assessment? Dr. Gilmore?
Yes, the F-35, and when you're talking about close air support, it will do it much differently than the A-10. And we are going to do those comparison tests of the ability to perform CAS between the A-10 and the F-35 as an integral part of operational testing. And we're not going to say that, you know, the F-35 has to perform CAS the same way the A-10 does. We're going to let the F-35 pilots take advantage of the systems on that aircraft, deal with some of the limitations you mentioned as well as they can, and see how well the missions are carried out in terms of the ability to strike targets in a timely manner and accurately, and then report on that. And there are numerous arguments about how well each aircraft will do under different circumstances and different threats. Clearly, the F-35 should have an advantage in higher threat environments than the A-10 does. And so the comparison testing and our report will illuminate all that.
Mr. Chair, I'm out of time, but I just think Secretary Kendall looks like he wants to respond, and I think in fairness, we ought to give him an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a huge proponent and fan of the A-10. I'm an Army officer. It was purpose designed to be a close air support aircraft, and it was a very good design for that purpose. But if you asked an A-10 to do air-to-air, it's hopeless. The F-35 is designed as a multi-role aircraft that can do a variety of missions, air dominance, strike, and close air support. It does close air support differently. It doesn't have the features that you mentioned. Those are all real numbers, I think, that you gave. But what's different now than when the time the A-10 was conceived is the use of precision munitions and the ability of a wide variety of aircraft to put a munition like a small diameter bomb exactly where they want it to go. So the Air Force today does close air support with B-1 bombers, for example, something that traditionally would not have been possible. So times have changed. If we could afford it, I think everybody would like to keep the A-10 in the inventory because it is such a good special purpose aircraft for that one mission. But given the constraints we have on both the size of our force structure and the financial resources that we have, maintaining a one-mission aircraft in the Air Force was just not something that could fit into the balance we were trying to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, Senator Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing, and thanks to all of you, our witnesses, for your testimony today. The Utah delegation has had the opportunity to witness firsthand the rollout of the F-35 in the Air Force as the 388th and the 419th Fighter Wings at Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah, prepare to reach initial operating capacity, or IOC, later this year. We've also been able to see the development of the logistics and maintenance functions of the F-35A at the Ogden Air Logistics Complex, which has been so effective that they've been called to assist both the Marine Corps and the Navy in meeting the modernization goals for their respective variants of the F-35, and we're very proud of that. The men and women who are working to train on, to test, and to keep these jets in the air are models of American ingenuity and hard work and patriotism and dedication at its very best. And I hope this Congress will provide them with the resources that they very much need in order to continue succeeding in their mission. General Bogdan, one of the main obstacles for the F-35A reaching its IOC goals this year, of course, involves the continued development of Alice. which is, of course, used to manage the logistics and supply chain for maintaining the F-35, not just now during the rollout, but throughout its lifetime. Can you tell me how is the Joint Program Office working with industry to ensure that this capability is functional and is fully integrated into this weapons platform in a timely and effective manner?
Thank you, Senator. The ALICE system right now that the Air Force needs at Hill Air Force Base is on track to be about 60 days later than we planned. And the biggest issue we have right now is getting the maintenance and supply chain and configuration management of the engine, the F-135, integrated into the ALICE system. That has proven to be more difficult than we had anticipated, but because it requires both Lockheed Martin and Pratt & Whitney's back-end ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning systems, to talk to each other and to connect with ALICE. We've worked with Lockheed Martin across the whole company, as well as some of their teammates, and we have brought in some software experts from within DoD to try over the last few months to figure out where those difficulties lie. The good news there is we understand where the difficulties are. Now we just have to go and execute. And like I said, I think we're probably going to be about 2 months late getting that done, but I think we, from a technical standpoint, will be able to get it done.
Okay, that's good to know. And it's good anytime you can at least contain a delay and look forward and conclude that you've got a known quantity. Because of budget reductions and the inability to retire the A-10, the Air Force is concerned about a potential shortfall of experienced uniformed maintainers to transition to F-35 units and keep those weapons safe and to keep them functional. So, General Bogdan, has the Air Force been able to resolve this problem in the short term, and what long-term complications do you see that might still exist for ensuring that a generation of maintainers is being trained to keep pace with the process of integrating the F-35 into the Air Force?
Yes, sir. In the short term, when the Air Force was faced last year with a shortage of maintainers for their IOC capability at Hill Air Force Base, they asked the program office to populate an entire squadron at Luke Air Force Base with contractor logistics support personnel. And we did that. The 62nd Squadron at Luke Air Force Base today on the flight line is maintained with approximately 110 contractors as opposed to blue suit maintainers. That gave the Air Force the flexibility to take those maintainers that would have been at Luke Air Force Base and transfer them to Hill Air Force Base for IOC. That is just a Band-Aid, though, and that is a short-term fix. In the long term, I believe the Air Force needs the ability to move maintainers around for the growing fleet of F-35s, and we're committed to working with them to increase the throughput of maintainers through the schoolhouse, and to work with our partners, and to work with the Guard and the Reserve in the Air Force, who can provide some of that manpower. I'll defer to the Air Force on those solutions, though, sir.
Let me ask you one more question as my time is expiring. Can you tell me, did the Department of Defense originally intend the F-35 to be a direct replacement for the A-10 in close air support missions, or was it designed to work with other Air Force and Joint Forces systems to fulfill the Department's needs as far as close air support goes? And what's your assessment of how the services will be able to work together to meet close air support needs through integrated and joint operations?
So what I will tell you is, over time, the evolution of the way we conduct close air support in the Department of Defense has evolved. It is no longer a single airplane out there talking to a ground controller and dropping a single weapon. It is a much more integrated fight. It is much more reliant on multi-platforms and multiple communication systems with both the ground and the air. Given that, the F-35 in the future, today and in the future, will have the capabilities to seamlessly integrate into that network to perform close air support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. The chairman is on his way back from the second vote, and I'm also told that Senator Blumenthal and Senator Kane are coming for questioning. But at this point, if I may, on behalf of the Chairman, just take a short recess, perhaps for just a few moments until the Chairman returns. So we will stay in a recess until the Chairman returns. Thank you. Again, on behalf of Chairman Kane, call the hearing to order, and at this time recognize Senator King for his questions. Senator King.
Mr. Gilmore, one of the concerns that I have, and it's been touched on in this hearing, is the length of time this platform is expected to serve, roughly 20 years from now, 30-plus years from initial inception. I think back to any product that I may have bought in 2004. I was originally thinking of Senator Graham's flip phone. I wouldn't want to be flying that in 2040. Are we building upgradability into this airplane so that it can keep up with the times? In other words, is it designed with that in mind?
That's a question to me, Senator?
Yes, sir.
Well, I will defer the details to General Bogdan. This aircraft is going to be much more upgradable than the F-22 was. But having said that, we've already identified a need for an upgrade from the current, well, from the now being installed Technical Refresh 2 processor, which provides additional capability relative to the processors that have been in the aircraft bought to this point. We've identified a need for an upgrade to that, a Technical Refresh 3 processor. In this program, moving from one processor to another is not nearly as arduous a problem as in the F-22, where there was a lot of software that was developed with features that were tied very specifically to the processors in order to maximize capability. But it's still not a trivial matter, as has been demonstrated recently by the stability problems that we now hope have been resolved with the Technical Refresh 2 processor. So, you know, upgradability is being built in, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be trivial to execute.
Okay. General Bogdan, quickly, because I've got several other questions, but what's your thought about, are we going to be able to upgrade this airplane so that it's not going to be obsolete in 2025?
I believe we will, sir. There's a few points I'll make. One is, when we do replace the next version of the computer or the brains in the airplane, we are requiring open standards and modular open system architecture, which will allow for the incorporation of new sensors and new capabilities much easier. Second, when we first originally designed the airplane, we knew many of our partners and FMS customers would want to put unique weapons on the airplane, so we've created a system that will allow us to integrate multiple kinds of weapons on the airplane, rather not trivial, but in an easier way. So from both those perspectives, I believe the airplane is adaptable and growable. The third is, many of the capabilities inherent in the airplane today that make it special are software-based. Right. Therefore, in the future, as new capabilities come on, like electronic warfare and electronic attack, we will be able to upgrade the software in an easier way than you would the hardware.
I think this has got to be an important part of our whole acquisition process as we're buying 40-year assets, the Ohio-class submarine, the B-21, on and on. Mr. Secretary Kendall, was the attempt at jointness in this project a mistake in retrospect?
It's a good question, Senator. I think the honest answer is I'm not sure. I was present at the inception of F-35. It started out as a technology program that was instituted by one of my predecessors when I was on the staff. We are now thinking about the follow-on aircraft for the Navy and the Air Force, and I don't think we're going to repeat this. I think that, first of all, I think the design parameters are going to be quite different for the follow-on aircraft for the two services. We did get some benefit from commonality, but there's very little commonality in the structure. So I think we could still get some of those benefits without having to have a single program. I think
you could get benefits in terms of common bolts,
common
and
avionics, common sensor systems, and so on. Yeah. So I think those could still be achieved without having a common program necessarily. I think you'd have to make that decision kind of as your plans for modernization for acquisition became more real and material as to whether or not it paid off or not. I think it's astonishing to me, frankly, that we have been able to keep this program together for so long, keep the 3 services fully committed, and keep all of our international partners fully committed. And we have 2 that are kind of on the fence right now, but at this stage of the game, everybody's still in. Pulling all that off is not a small achievement. That's very hard to do. So I think we have to think very carefully about that. The more complexity you have in a program, the more risk you have. And I don't know that the savings are necessarily worth that complexity and the risk that goes with it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I thank you all for your being here today and for your insights on this very challenging program. It is as complex as it is critical to our national defense, and we should expect on this committee, and the American public should anticipate, that a weapons platform of this complexity will also have bumps in the road in its development and research. I take it none of you would disagree with that basic proposition. Despite that bumpy road at some point, the F-35 as a whole has already made significant advancements in a number of areas, and in particular the F-135 program provides truly a 5th generational power capability to the fleet. Every low-rate initial production LRIP contract, as I understand it, for the F-135 has been on or below cost. The recent announcement of the LRIP lots 9 and 10 will bring the price down another 3.4% from the LRIP 8. To date, the F-135 conventional takeoff and landing engine cost has been reduced by 47% since the initial flight test engines. The Stovall engine cost has been reduced by 34% in the same time period. These are real achievements. And in addition, Pratt & Whitney has already identified technology improvement options that will increase the thrust, durability, and fuel efficiency that could ultimately save billions of dollars for this program. The F-135 is meeting the key FY 2020 milestones, again, my understanding, for mission capability and engine reliability. Are those facts that are accurately stated so far as the panel knows?
So they're very accurate.
Thank you. All that said, I know that questions have been raised, General Bogdan, about the F-135 performance, and I take it that from your testimony that quality has not been an issue so far as the Pratt & Whitney supplier performance has been concerned.
Sir, 2 or 3 years ago, I would have told you I was worried about that. I will tell you that Pratt & Whitney has done a good job of standing up a quality organization within Pratt & Whitney Military Engines that has dug down deep into their supply chain and helped improve that significantly.
Thank you. Well, their supply chain is a lot of it based in Connecticut, and I can tell you from my experience in Connecticut that our suppliers and manufacturers have recognized the challenge we face for this century. Literally, this weapons platform will be critical to our national defense throughout this century. We can look back and draw lessons, and we should, from the challenges that caused that improvement to take place, and maybe even the overall conceptual framework, as you suggested, Secretary Kendall. Should there have been more individualization of the platform for different services? But I can well recall that the conventional wisdom not so long ago was that the services ought to get together and collaborate and buy a single fighter, and that was the wisdom du jour of contracting in its day, and now maybe lessons point in a different direction. So I hope that we will learn lessons from this procurement experience, but there is, I think there has to be a recognition that this weapons platform will do things that no fighter engine or platform has done in the past. Would you agree, Dr. Gilmore?
The investment ranking is large, and need that we have is large to deal with the threats that currently exist. If the F-35 doesn't succeed, we'll be in a pickle.
We have a common national interest in making sure it succeeds. Correct?
Yes.
Would you agree, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, I would. We definitely need to have this moving forward. This is the 5th generation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let me just say in summary, it's been a scandal, and the cost overruns have been disgraceful. And this committee, in our authorization responsibilities, will take whatever actions we can to prevent a reoccurrence. It should not take 15 years and still not have an aircraft IOC with the cost overrun after cost overrun. So I guess my question finally, Mr. Sullivan, do you think that we have learned the lessons and taken sufficient measures to prevent a reoccurrence, or do we need to do some more?
I think there's always room to do more. I don't think we've learned all the lessons yet, but I would say that if you go back 5 or 6 years from now, or go back to, say, 2010, we're not seeing as many F-35s or, these big programs with requirements that aren't achievable. So I think we're learning some lessons that way. Some of that could be because of budget constraints. Some of it is from the work that the Congress has done. And frankly, I think the department has done a good job of trying to implement and drive down into the culture some better practices. They talk about their better buying power initiatives. We got a long way to go, though. I mean, there's still way too much cost growth on these programs. We're not using enough, looking at requirements in an incremental way, using open systems, as Senator King was talking about. There's a lot of things we can do to create more efficiencies.
Dr. Gilmore?
Well, I think Block 4 will be a good test of whether we've learned lessons. As mentioned in my written statement, I see a number of unrealistic assumptions with regard to Block 4. And so I hope, as Secretary Kendall and General Bogdan take a look at how to structure that program, that they take a look at those issues, and that will be a good test.
Secretary Kendall and General Bogdan, I hope you'll pay attention to Dr. Gilmore's words, particularly given his responsibilities to the Department of Defense as well as to the Congress. I thank the witnesses, and I believe that most of the takeaway from this is that we are making progress, that we have challenges that lie ahead, but there has been some significant improvements as opposed to some years ago. So I thank the committee for their hard work, and the witnesses for their hard work, and this hearing is adjourned.